Welcome to the Paul Hickey podcast. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoy this interview with Nashville entrepreneur pioneer Sloane Scott. No fancy, no level of fancy at all. It's just
doesn't need to
straight
be.
up.
Right.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a big lo-fi person. I don't
Okay.
think you need a bunch of bells and whistles.
Okay.
Or they wouldn't have made technologies that's this good.
We've talked for a total of 15 minutes in our life, and you've said everything you've said I totally agree with.
Well.
Because, clients will get kind of intimidated about, well, how do we create content? And I'm just kind of saying, just go ahead and start creating. Right. Is that what you agree with that? Okay.
To a certain extent,
yeah. What's your take?
I mean, there's a balance on that.
Uh-huh.
I think, working in the business of healthcare, there's what I've learned over time is there's certain types of content where it does make sense to maybe put a little bit more of an investment.
Yeah.
In where I would spend that money is on the expertise around it. So not necessarily the tech that enables it, but the expertise. So building explainer videos, there is a science to that, and doing it in the right way with the right content and the right tone and those types of things, that's where I think it makes sense. But again, you can get a great explainer video done for $3,000.
Yeah.
I mean,
thank you.
You don't need.
Yeah, totally.
What I always tell clients, and it's always the interesting part of the content conversation, right? Because inevitably, no matter what vertical you're in, everybody's always looking at what their competitors are doing and thinks, well, maybe we should just do that. Well, to me, especially when it comes to video content, unless you can really put a content budget towards a consistent cadence of creating that video and putting it out on a regular basis, it doesn't make sense to do it. Because if you put one thing out there in the universe and then you never come back to it, you just put it out there in the universe.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's where sometimes, I don't know if you've had that experience, but sometimes I've learned that where people are like, well, I didn't realize I actually need to put a budget to it. If you're going to do that, yes. Now, can we do a couple of things at the beginning, and then as you create more opportunities, we can set aside more budget to do it? Yes. Of course, there's lots of ways to sort of slice and dice that.
Yeah, exactly. Now, this is Sloane Scott from the Punching Nun Group. Oh. We're on the Paul Hickey podcast. Can I say from the Punching Nun Group?
Yeah, absolutely.
And okay, great. And she is an amazing digital marketer and business strategist. And this is exactly why I love talking to people like you, and getting together and sharing ideas and best practices, because I think I think about the same things that you're thinking about and talking about as it relates to how to create content, the investment, and how you need to put consistent content out there. That was going to be my next question for you, and you answered it right away. And yeah, my whole thesis is that if you're not consistent with it in having more than just that one video or more than just that one piece of content, then how are people going to find you? And it's kind of like web design and development too. I think a lot of my experience going back, 8 or 9 years, whatever, of building websites, back then, and even more it's still happening now, is the expectation was kind of, okay, can you build me a website, or let's build this and then let's just watch the traffic grow, right? And so, there's still sometimes that thought process that we have to coach, depending on who we're working with, around, okay, give people a consistent reason to engage with your brand and become an advocate of your brand. And it's harder than ever now to kind of break through everything. But I'm just wondering, we have a little bit of time to talk about all those things, but before we get into that, let's take some time and just kind of get to know you a little bit about you personally and professionally. Tell us anything and everything you want to about you and your career.
Sure. So, I guess I'll start at the beginning. It's always a good place to start. I started my first company at 13. And it was really for no other reason than I wanted to go to Europe for the summer of my 16th birthday. And my dad had worked a lot in Europe, so we had families that I could go stay with. And I just always wanted to travel like that, and said I'm going to do that, and knew I couldn't make enough money babysitting. I couldn't make enough money, you know, working in retail, that kind of thing. I was too young, so there were all kinds of parameters back then about that. And I just said, all right, well, what's the one thing I know how to do? Well, I love to cook. So I started cooking with my grandmother in her kitchen from the time I could stand on a little stool and reach the counter. So I love to cook. So what I said is, you know what? I'm going to cater and cook meals for folks. And the only meal that I really could do, because I was still in school, was dinner. So I called the company Dinner. And basically went through my mom and dad's friends. My dad helped me set up a bank account. And I would create the menu, cook, clean. It was an all-cash business. And that's how I made enough money to go to Europe for the summer of my 16th birthday.
You did it.
Yeah, I did it.
That's amazing.
And
you knew that at age 13, that
Yeah.
that was your goal, to go at age 16.
That's all I wanted to do.
And that was what you wanted to do.
And then I figured out once I'd done that, I went, okay, well, I can do other things as well. So not only did I make enough money to go to Europe, I also made enough money to put myself through college.
No way.
So yeah, so
Awesome.
tried the college thing. It didn't work for me.
Okay.
I got bored about a year and a half in and dropped out.
Okay.
And decided I wanted to take the cooking career and keep going. So I went to culinary school and graduated and worked for exactly 30 days as a chef. I worked under an apprentice chef in Chicago who's pretty well known, and he said to me after 30 days, he said, and he was really my first mentor, so that was kind of a big moment in time.
Yeah.
He said, you're really great behind the scenes, but you belong out front. You belong working with people, managing people, and I can't do that for you, but I'm going to introduce you to someone who can.
Okay.
Well, it just turned out that it was, at that time, one of the biggest restaurateurs in Chicago, Richard Melman, who owns Let Us Entertain You, which is a big chain. So worked with him, and then worked with Mark and Larry Levy, and got to travel all over the country and live in lots of great places.
So at this point, you're not regretting dropping out of college?
No, never regretted it.
And you never have?
No, I never regretted
That's
it.
amazing.
No, but that was just for me. That was my story.
Right, absolutely.
And then that's how I ended up in Nashville. So
Okay.
Levy signed a partnership with Gaylord Entertainment to take over as the operating partner of the Wild Horse Saloon down on 2nd Avenue.
Okay.
And I was brought in as part of the team, the turnaround team, to turn around. So got to Nashville in '93, and worked for a year in the biggest country music nightclub, not having any exposure to country music other than my mother played the Gambler album from Kenny Rogers, like a broken record. So I knew that.
Okay.
That was my extent
That was
of
it.
country music. That was it. And a little Willie Nelson, but that literally was it.
Yeah.
So got to Nashville, had no idea what I was getting into, but knew the business well enough.
Mm-hmm.
So went in as the HEM around the food operations and redesigned the restaurants, worked with the team that was there, and really got experience in the music industry. It was my first sort of exposure to the business side of music.
Mm-hmm.
And during that time, just met an incredible amount of people, everyone from agents to performers, celebrities, to the guys that do the load-in, sound check, you know, the guys driving the trucks with all the gear.
Yeah.
So it was a great sort of indoctrination in the music business, which is what led to my next move in the business, which was really, again, going a little bit more on the freelance side. I taught myself how to code and started working in digital marketing before there was really a title for it, right?
Yeah.
So worked for the Nashville scene for a while, taught them how to take classifieds online and make a bunch of money out of it. So worked it with them for a while, which was really cool. And that's when I met Mark Montgomery.
Okay.
Yeah.
So before we continue, I'm just curious, how did you teach yourself how to code?
So I discovered this thing called the internet at that point.
I've heard of
and
that.
people were starting to market on it. I mean, it's still the early 90s.
Yep,
so
totally.
it was the wild, wild west, right?
Yep.
People were starting to market on it, and I figured I had to learn what that was about.
Okay.
And so
And a lot of people were ignoring it, thinking
Yeah.
it was a fad, too.
Yeah.
So you were like, this is legit.
This is something
Yeah.
I need to pay attention to it,
Yeah.
and I want to learn it. And so it wasn't like you could go to school and get taught how to code for computers.
Yeah, you're like the pioneer, I have to imagine, in that at the time, especially for females.
Yeah,
I think.
there weren't any of us.
Yeah.
And so it was a really cool opportunity for me, and I wanted to learn it, right?
Yeah.
And now I've forgotten most of
Okay.
that. But it was a great experience, and it gave me the next kind of move forward. So I went to work for Mark Montgomery, who most people know. If you've been in Nashville for any period of time, he's sort of the tech and music entrepreneur at Echo Music in its really early days. So I was like employee number 36, I think.
Okay.
Which is really cool because, again, Echo Music at that time was one of the 5 companies in the country that was selling music and merchandise to fans before iTunes existed.
Okay.
Right? So, again,
Digitally.
Wild Wild West.
Yeah.
Napster, MySpace. I mean, it was the Wild Wild West.
Yeah.
And we were the first company to really mine that data and find patterns in that data around consumer preferences.
Yeah.
I mean, it's permission marketing, right?
This is podcast version 2, 3, 4, and 5 with Sloane Scott at a later date to be determined.
But that's what it was,
totally.
right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
You were really looking at how do you take and what do you learn from that data and how people are behaving with it, interacting with it, using it to purchase things. I mean, people were buying records, merchandise, fan club memberships.
Were your minds just blowing at this point? Because
yeah.
we're some of the first people ever to be doing this. We're getting data around how consumers are buying music.
It was
real
crazy.
data digitally, like where people aren't guessing and just going off of
opinions. I mean, in terabytes and terabytes and terabytes of it.
Yeah,
I mean, it was a lot of data. And the cool thing is that it was also really my first experience at working inside a startup culture. And Mark, if I'd say anything, I'd say the legacy that Mark left from Echo Music was the importance of that culture inside a startup.
Okay.
I mean, we were at a house on 16th Avenue with, pinball machines in the basement and coders everywhere who were an anomaly at that time too.
Yeah.
And, the Americana Music Association was up in the second floor in one little room, and, dogs running everywhere and coffee all the time, and it was the early days.
How bad do you wish you had a video of that? Like, we were just talking about documenting stuff, right?
I'm almost glad we don't.
Oh, really? You're glad it's not on YouTube somewhere?
I'm glad there's really very little documentation of it, other than you have to take my word for it.
Okay, gotcha.
Right, because those were the early days,
Yeah.
And it was the music business, and it was, it was a very, very busy, fast-changing time. I mean, it was a point in time when, everybody did things the same way on Music Row. You had agents, you had publicists, you had song pickers. You put an album out on the same day, and by the way, the same day that the album comes out, the new website comes out. And attached to the new website comes the CD goes out, right? I mean, there was a very sort of scientific approach to it.
Yeah.
And it was, this is how it works, and it's tried and true, and this is what we know, right? But I think what we had a bird's eye view into at Echo that most people didn't is how fast that was going to change.
Okay.
Because technology was changing that.
Yeah.
And consumers were changing it because we had that data to be able to look at it and go, whoa.
Yeah. So, for example, as others were going through that sort of wash, rinse, repeat process, you and Mark and others were looking at, hey, there's other consumer trends over here, like Napster and some of these other things that ways people were getting music.
Right. Not only ways they were getting music, but the intelligence that we were collecting behind the scenes around those preferences.
Gotcha.
And I think that was where, kind of fast forward a couple of years later, we took that data, and I remember one of the conversations Mark and some of the other guys and I had, and that was that, you're leaving a lot of money on the table. This data is actually worth something. So, but who's it worth something to? It's worth something to brands. So for us, when we started that, we started a sponsorship and endorsement division inside of Echo. And part of that was really taking the data and being able to say to a brand, listen, we have the consumer preferences. We actually we know how to get to these people, and we know the kind of messaging and content they'll react to. And that, you know, was a game changer for us. We were really lucky in our first partnership from that perspective, and it was one of, I believe, and I'm not sure this is 100% correct, but I think it's close. I believe we were one of the first companies to do a digital device embed. So we did a deal with Marcy Allen, who owns Mac Presents, another really talented music entrepreneur, and BlackBerry and John Mayer. So BlackBerry was coming out with a phone called the Curve. And most people only remember iPhones, but really, BlackBerries are actually the phone that created apps. There were apps on BlackBerry.
Yeah, I remember. I remember
an iPhone, right?
I remember I had a BlackBerry.
Right, we all did, right? The wheel, we all had it. We all had it, right? We all had it.
The gray screen. I thought it was so cool.
Yeah, it was like the early version.
I had the blue
of
one.
Oh yeah, right. And Curve was the next version.
Yeah.
Curve was the younger, cooler,
like
hipper
sleeker
version,
gray,
sleeker and smaller.
Yep.
Right. That was you know. Yeah. We'd moved on from the wheel.
Totally.
So when the Curve came out, we embedded 1 million copies of Continuum, Mayer's album that really made him, right?
Yeah.
In the phone. So when you turned on the phone, all of a sudden you already had music in your phone.
Nice. Yeah.
So that, and what we did is Echo became kind of the digital marketing arm behind the tour, using Ticketmaster data. So we mined all the Ticketmaster data. We did a partnership with Ticketmaster, who ended up acquiring Echo later on. And you know, we mined all the ticket data of fans who had bought tickets to John Mayer concerts, and used that to propel the tour. And then took all the intelligence around it to inform BlackBerry about what apps to actually spend time adding to, or what apps to get rid of, or what was missing. So that was a really unique way back then to be able to sort of position.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Not only is it, like it's way ahead of its time, because there's still companies that don't even necessarily do it to that extent. You know?
No.
And so you guys killed it.
Yeah. So it was amazing. And we were, you know, we were learning too.
Yeah.
You know,
that's great. Sounds like so much fun.
It was crazy.
I'm sure you didn't sleep very much and all that good stuff. But
no,
I'm sure
and there were some funny, like, you know, I always tell, everybody has always asked me in like interviews, like, what was your biggest failure? Or where was that moment where, like, did you ever have that, like, that watershed mistake moment? And I had, in my career, one of my biggest watershed moments was at Echo. I won't give it away now. We'll save it for another time.
Because this is just version 1. Let's talk.
But it's a very, very funny story. And it's something I learned a lot from further on, or, you know, later on in my career.
That's very cool. Okay, so we talked a little bit about talking about positives and negatives to digital marketing right now.
Yeah.
What are some things that you think are right with what you're seeing? What's going well right now that either you're experiencing with Punching Nun Group and some of your clients, or that you see others doing that you feel like are good things to do? Best practices. What do you feel like the best practices are that are happening right now?
You know, it's interesting because I think technology is evolving so rapidly that I don't even know that we have the chance to really measure best practices the way that we used to. Mm-hmm. I think it's become a much more personalized approach to digital marketing, and that's one of the things I see that is changing how we market across the board, whether it's digital marketing, print marketing, whatever it is. I think the era of personalization and really feeling as if you're speaking to me as a consumer and I have control over how I decide to interact with you or buy from you. I mean, technology is changing preferences, I think, without people even realizing their preferences are being changed. Mm-hmm. And I think what's interesting about that is you look at the big players, right? You look at the Amazons of the world. I mean, before Facebook, we knew MySpace existed, but we didn't call it social media. Right? So, you know, when you think about that and you think about where technology came from, in digital marketing, it's all about the audience you're talking to, right? Yeah. And so depending on who that is and how you personalize that conversation, well, that really impacts what channels you're going to use. And I think we've gone from an era of spray and pray, like do everything because everybody else is doing it, we need to be everywhere, to hyper focus.
Okay.
Which is where I think moving forward, that's where the business is going to go. I mean, Mark taught me a quote really early on at Echo Music that I still use today, so I'll give him credit for it because that's where it belongs. But he said, you know, everything has to contract first to expand.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what's happening now, is you're seeing this contraction of focusing, less of spending a lot of money, more around a focused spend, learn from it, fine tune it, because that's the other thing I think that's happening, is that at no other time in history have we been able to measure as quickly as we can today, especially in digital marketing. And optimize as quickly as we can today. And as cost effectively. So the other thing I think that's happening is that the era of gigantic marketing budgets and massive agency pitches and all of that is going away.
Okay. And you've experienced that firsthand, you feel like?
Yeah.
And that's music to my ears, because I feel like that's how it should be, and that's what's in the best interest of the brands and the small businesses. If you're a mom and pop shop or a solopreneur or whatever, all the way up to the largest brands, like, we should all be spending our money in the wisest possible way.
Right.
And so to hear you say that is music to my ears. And it's interesting that you said what you said about being able to look at the data and basically pivot or make moves quickly on what's happening.
Right.
Because I certainly feel like the expectations as a digital marketer from our clients are right in line with that, you know, and that's where I feel like they should be. So it's good to hear you say that. What are some of the things that you're dealing with right now? Like, what are some of the things that Punching Nun Group gets? What are common challenges that Punching Nun Group gets from prospective clients or current clients in terms of how to focus? So you talked about focusing. How do you take them to contraction, generally speaking, and so that they can then expand out from there?
Yeah, it's a great question. What I would say is that, you know, every client is different, but they have similarities within, you know, the business models.
Mm-hmm.
What we find a lot at Punching Nun Group is a lot of the companies that we work with are very successful. To get to that next level, right, there's been some occurrence that's happened. To get to that next level, it's really calibration more than it's throw it out and start it over. Mm-hmm. It's really this idea of calibrating and fine-tuning. We live in an era where you don't get to decide what value you deliver to the market. You know who decides that? Google.
Okay.
Google.
Yeah.
Google decides who you are.
Yep.
When you set up a LinkedIn profile, you take a lot of time looking at what industry am I going in, right? It's that same thought process. It's your audience decides.
Yep.
You may be directionally correct and almost right, but inevitably it's your audience and the buyers.
Yeah.
And really what we find is it's just bringing that buyer perspective and taking what they've done and focusing it in on what's the value they provide, what problems do they solve, you know, and being able to say it in a way that resonates with that audience. So that's where that personalization comes from.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times in, not just in healthcare, but even in consumer brands as well, which I've worked in that quite a bit, we forget that we're talking to human beings. Okay?
Yeah.
Tech is great, and I'm the biggest geek alive. So tech is great, but it just enables you to do something. It doesn't fix things. It doesn't, you know, you might be able to put a little, you know, sensor pad on your head and tell your temperature, but it's not going to drive you to the store and get you cold medicine.
Right.
Now, can you order that cold medicine from Amazon?
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's, you get where I'm going with it,
totally.
Right? It's really that piece of it, and it doesn't matter what industry you're in. I think that's where the rubber meets the road, right? And then instead of doing 20 things around that marketing approach, do 3.
Yeah.
And do them well. You know, where I think a lot of companies get caught up is they forget to own their own backyard first.
Mm-hmm.
It's a grow, and it's a phrase I use a lot personally, is that, you know, there's a way to honor those that brought you to the dance and fill up a new dance card at the same time.
Okay, I love everything you're saying.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I think that it's definitely well, what you said about what did you just say? I love what you said a minute ago about
the dance
speaking
card?
to humans.
Yeah.
Speaking to humans, what resonates for me with that is that I think a lot of folks who have, I mean, whether or not they've been in their job for 1 year, 10 years, 20 years, the commonality that I see is they have a sales goal or a revenue goal to try to achieve. A lot of times it comes from an arbitrary number. I think with maybe some brands or companies that you work with, it sounds like maybe it doesn't come from an arbitrary number. There's a little bit more thought process behind it, which is great. But however that breaks down, when you get down to, okay, how do you even begin to grow your revenue, it starts with speaking to humans who are your customers, understanding them, and how do you do that?
Right.
And what I see is getting from, we've got this revenue goal, let's bring on this marketing team or this agency or unagency, anti-agency to help us with this. How can we mix together our recipe to all of a sudden grow our revenue number? Well, what's missing is like translating this company jargon about growing our revenue and our value proposition to what the customer actually cares about.
Absolutely.
And to me, like when you said speaking to a human being, that's what I think of, is like, get past the company jargon, get past all the value propositions and acronyms that you all talk about, and translate that into, this is how we can help you solve your problem, but do it in a way consistently where it's more entertaining or thought-provoking or
Problem solving,
emotional, like kind of getting you on an emotional level, pulling at your heartstrings. So I don't know, any like good examples or best examples of things you want to share that to getting there, like getting.
So one of the things, I had the great benefit when I was a co-founder at Flow to work with probably one of the best wordsmiths I've ever met.
Okay.
So a guy named Kid Red, who you may have been familiar with. So Kid taught me the value of less is more from a words perspective, and how to do it with some personality, and how to do it in a way that says what you needed to say, but in one sentence without a comma. So that's really what I've spent a lot of time doing, and what we at Punching Nun Group. If you get the message right, and you get the brand right, the sales problem will fix itself.
Yep.
It
Totally.
will. It will fix itself. And you'll calibrate because you learn.
Yep.
Every time you work with a new customer, with that client, you learn. They're your best resource, right? Is
totally.
Clients who have had a great relationship and understand that it's a partnership and it's not just a transaction. So that's the other thing, I think, going back to the original part of the question, you know, when you're looking at where is marketing and going, marketing is always attached to sales. I mean, at Punching Nun Group, when people ask us how are we measured, it's one answer. We're measured on how many leads we deliver.
Yep.
That's it. It's not 20 KPIs, it's one. Now there might be some KPIs behind it, but it's one.
Yeah.
That's it. That's how we're measured. And so with those two pieces always intertwined, it's always thinking about, all right, what are salespeople learning out in the field that we can take that intelligence and turn it into a meaningful message for the client so they can benefit from it? What are the right tools to create? It's not about creating more of them. It's about creating the right ones and what the audience will ingest. And then just that constant calibration. I know it's a word I've used, but there's a discipline behind that. And I think having that type of disciplined approach to what you create and how you talk about it is where the industry's going.
Yeah, love it. And so it's clear to me in talking to you that you've spent thousands of hours doing the work.
Yes.
You know, and it only, you know, you can only have this type of experience and be, like you guys say, the resident adults. Right? But I know what that means. I mean, it means that, like, you do have the chops, you do have the experience, and really what it means to me is accountability. It's hard to find people, in my experience, it's very hard to find people, even at some of the best places I've ever worked for or at, who are truly accountable. Like, who truly, like, when you say we're held to one thing and that's how many leads do we generate, and when you say we're the resident adults, and then just even talking to you, it's like, okay, Sloane is accountable, Amanda clearly accountable, and that's, I believe, and I might be, like, I'm an optimist, but this might be the pessimistic side of me coming through. In my experience, it's super hard to find people who are truly accountable for achieving goals, either at the client level or the agency level. I'm wondering your take on that, but then also we talked about a little bit, before the podcast, we talked about kind of being the un-agency, if you will.
Sure.
Seems like something, well, I won't speak for you. It's something I'm proud of. I don't think that, so just for the record, like, I don't think agencies are bad.
No.
But I don't think that they're the right fit for all kinds of businesses, and I think that there are a lot of businesses out there who don't know that there's other options other than going to a quote-unquote agency, and I think that we're moving out of an era where, you made this point, but, like, I believe we're moving out of this era where that's the only option. And so I don't want to steal your thunder on that, because you made some good points, but talk about any of that.
Yeah, so I'll start at the beginning. So what I would say is that when I talk about being the resident adults, or that disciplined approach, right, and that accountability, that is something that, you know, I really learned from Amanda. So I'm very blessed that I've been able to work alongside someone as smart and talented as she is, but she's also very pragmatic, and she's been in the business and has the industry knowledge. She is that expertise. And, you know, what I bring to the table is another perspective, another point of view, which is also valuable but different, right? And so I think the other piece of that, and my point there, is that it's also about surrounding yourself with people who complement you with that same discipline, that same accountability, right? Because if you hold yourself to that standard, then finding other people that also hold you to that standard is really important. And so, you know, Amanda would say it really comes from her background from servant leadership and why she founded Punching On Group and the principles behind that. But a lot of that is that transparency and that accountability, right? And that discipline. And it, you know, it also speaks to where we're going, which is the second part of the question, which is we're in the freelance economy now, right? To your point, agencies, there are some incredibly talented people inside agency walls. Agencies now, I believe, are much more of a stepping stone for individuals. You know, they can learn and hone their craft there, and really begin to sort of build out what they think their career is going to look like. But careers and what we do for a living today are completely different than they were even 5 years ago. I mean, you know, the days of huge retainers and clients that stay with you for 20 years, and that's gone. It just doesn't exist. And I think technology's played a role in that. I think there have been a lot of factors, but when you look at the freelance economy, and Nashville is certainly embracing that to the fullest extent, it's also, to me, a breath of fresh air, because what it means is you can work with a lot of different individuals who bring a different tone of voice, and there's not that sense of sameness all the time.
Yep.
You get a different perspective, you get a different talent, you get a different skill set and all of that. And when you find people who are really talented and passionate about what they do, there's something about when you tap that person to bring them into a project or retain, however that works for your business, it's a breath of fresh air.
Yeah. It's
a different perspective that you don't have. It's something that they have and bring to the table. And that's something that when Amanda built Punching On Group, that's what she did. It was finding people who are really talented and disciplined about what they do and letting them do it.
Yeah. And the great thing about people who do that, they're changing so much about people's lives, and you've helped me see that perspective through this conversation. And also from a business standpoint, they're allowing everyone who's doing business with them to get more value.
Yes.
Because they're taking a lot of the overhead costs, unnecessary, whatever it may be, meetings, brick and mortar, fancy stuff in offices, commute times. All of it is kind of breaking down to the point where let's talk as much as we need to talk, let's do the work, and let's connect to our target audiences, see the results, measure the results, and I'll use your word, calibrate. I love that word. And you just get more value. And not that the work isn't as valuable, not that there's not as much opportunity for people like us to make money. It's actually, it should be more opportunity for everybody to make money, because if we can break down all these unnecessary time is money and hard costs, then we should all be able to focus on the work and driving results.
Right, and again, it goes back to that part of the human conversation. You're still dealing with people, right?
Yeah.
You're building a partnership, you're collaborating with people who have got different goals and different dreams and different things that they're held accountable to, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, as you build with any relationship, as you build that partnership with a client, the more value you bring, the stronger the partnership gets. And when there's always that moment in time when it's ready for you both to move on, well, if you've done your job right, you've put some goodness out there in the world, you've proved what you said you were going to do, that comes back. Yeah. I'm just a firm believer in it. It always does.
I totally agree. I think that doing the right thing is not only, well, my experience is, you know, you have a tough phone conversation with someone, and in my mind, I always reflect on this. You can go one route, you can go one of two routes. One is, you can make your point, kind of, you can say, this is how it is, this is how it's going to be, and then there's a way to make your point and make your decision and communicate it in a way that is going to be productive and collaborative towards the human side of things, and not make don't tear the other person down. And I'll be honest, like in my I guess 17 or 18 years working in the business world, I would choose the first way a lot, and then I would feel like crap, you know. I'd feel like, why did I, like, that doesn't feel right. And so to me, it's just like this barometer of, if you do what feels right, you do the right thing, it's gonna come around.
It does.
And even like, sometimes people don't think that immediately it's gonna come around, but it's like, well, just in feeling better about yourself walking away from that situation, it starts to come around. So to me, that's kind of like what resonates in terms of just doing the right thing and that human aspect of everything.
Right. Well, I think it's again, it goes back to sort of that calibration discussion, right? Which is, there's a measured way to do it, and there's a way to be able to share your point of view without having to talk over someone.
Yeah.
And there's a way to sort of share your perspective that's constructive.
That's right. Yeah. You have this amazing way of wordsmithing, I feel like exactly what I'm trying to say, so I appreciate that. I've learned a ton from you today. and I hope we get the opportunity to work with each other.
I love it.
At some
This is
point.
fun. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for watching and listening to the Paul Hickey podcast. Hopefully we can have Sloane back another time because I feel like we could talk for hours and hours.
Yeah, we had fun.
Thank you for your time.
You got it.
Thanks for listening to the Paul Hickey podcast. I truly appreciate your ear. Hope you have a great day and hope you enjoyed this episode.